Who is the markets?
Who is the markets? Who are the markets?
Who are the markets?
Yeah.
It's a very important question in South Africa. Yeah, who are the markets? In South Africa, you have about 10% of the population owning about 90%, over 80% of the economy. I think all political parties lost this election. I don't like the DA. I don't want them in government. I don't want to be called a Gupta bot.
Welcome back to Palatable Politics, a show where we take the complexity out of politics and make it palatable for you. With me, your host, TJ Maslela. Welcome to the show. In today's session, we're going to take a slightly different approach than normal. We're going to have a discussion with our guest who was protesting against a media campaign against certain coalitions. But here, to make it palatable for us, is none other than the ANC supporter, in his capacity as ANC supporter, Mr. Esethu Hasane.
Oh, Granjif.
Yeah, no. I'm good, right?
No, you said something important in your intro there, that I was protesting against a media campaign. And I've been emphasizing that, but some people choose to misinterpret it. I think there's been a huge media campaign towards a particular coalition. I'm not against government of national unity or against a coalition itself. It's inevitable. It will happen. But I just don't like that the South African media, specifically Media 24, has taken a particular posture and they've tried to present it as a view of everyone. In fact, I don't know if you saw there was a poll. We reject that poll.
Okay, let's start with background as to who you are.
You see, I'm entering hands-on.
Yeah.
No, my name is Esethu first. I'm a black, proudly South African from Engeleni, very small village town just outside Mthatha. I would have said I'm from Tata, but people from Tata always protest us, Bundu people, that you can't say you are from Tata, you're not from Ngangeliso anyway, you're from outside. So I'm outside Mthatha, Engeleni. And I work here in Pretoria.
How did you get involved in ANC? Why ANC?
Well, I think most of us will take it back to university. I've always been a forward person. If kutwa umntu uyapapa, they usually refer to me. I was in SRC from high school. I addressed the National Assembly preaching the word of God when I still thought I'm a Christian. And then when I got to university, I joined SASCO. So in my first year, I joined SASCO. I remember in the second year, I became part of the faculty council, humanities faculty council, as a SASCO rep. So once you join SASCO, inevitably you are going to join the ANC. So that's how I was introduced to the ANC. Later, I was in the SRC, and also it did not help that I chose political science as one of my majors in the first year. I chose public policy as one of my majors, international relations. So those fields and career choices that I made in varsity, they kind of conscientize you as to the type of politics that exist in South Africa and the type of policies that South Africa needs to address many of its challenges. And you are going to gravitate towards an ANC or an aligned type of ANC formation if you studied those majors, I think.
Okay, fine, fair enough. Now, let's go to the election.
Yes.
We're going to come back to the media statement, which I
Yes,
know you're
yes.
eager to. With regards to the result, firstly, a turnout of 58%, and the result that comes out with the ANC at 40%. How do you interpret it? How do you interpret that?
Well, some of us are fortunate that we also work for the ANC while we volunteer for it. So sometimes you are privy to some of the information that goes around in elections team meetings. So I think ANC expected a 38% voter support for the ANC 38 from its own internal polling, and that those polling kept on at least improving as the election was going on, but it was still below 50. So when everyone, example, was doubting the polls, I kept saying on social media, but why are you guys doubting polls? Because even if one or two are bought by some boogeyman somewhere. You can't say they're all bought and they're all saying the same thing. So, but as an election picks up and you see all these people on the campaign trail, I think as an ANC member who wants the party to win, you tend to even convince yourself that maybe a miracle might happen. So that thing happened of an ANC dropping to 40%. It shocked me. I got sick the entire week. I even said online that I did not know that the will of the people is this painful. We are still living through that pain. And I think if everything goes as what News 24 wants, more pain is still coming. So I am readying myself to self-medicate Friday when that sitting in Parliament happens.
We're still coming there.
Yes.
We're still coming there. But now, saying at 40%, what it's about a 17% decline from the previous election. But when one looks at that, it almost, the numbers of MK, it seems like it's a move and more. Ideology-wise, is there a difference between ANC, EFF, MK, etc.?
First, I think that's a very important question, and it's very difficult to respond to it in the context of specifically MK. I think I was speaking to a friend this week to say at the last ANC conference, KZN went to that conference with a position that they supported a particular candidate, and they were very sure about it, and they did not win. And then after they lost, you could see the crowd from KZN was down and they were literally crying. And when a president closes a conference, they actually say, delegates, you represent your communities. We often forget that each and every person who was crying in that floor, though they might have been ANC, they had taken a particular posture to that conference and they went home as a representative of those communities. And I think now we can safely say they worked to make sure that whoever inflicted that pain for them on the floor also experienced that pain. So some of us experienced that pain after election day, and I think it was inflicted on ANC by ANC people in KZN, not because they were taking a particular ideological posture when it comes to choosing who should lead them, but I think it was ANC's own internal factional infights that have manifested themselves into what has happened between the MK and the ANC, not necessarily an ideological position. But if we are to answer the question of ideology directly, I doubt MK Party has any particular sense of ideology. They did not have a manifesto until a week into the election. The only thing they were complaining about was Ramaphosa's ANC. Ramaphosa's ANC is not an ideology. But what you can interpret from that is what Zuma or President Zuma, Bazongshaya online, President Zuma guys, is what President Zuma has always been saying about the faction that beat him in Nazareth, that it's a business-friendly, business-orientated faction. It's an elite faction of the ANC. That's what he's always said. Wrongly or rightly, his followers probably believe him on that. So if you have to make it an ideological argument, you'd say maybe those voters voted against the ANC because they don't like a particular direction that the party is taking. I will take it back to the debate of radical economic transformation, the fact that there are people in the ANC currently, and those people who have defined themselves out of the ANC now in MK, who push for a particular set of policies that they brand as radical. So those people also are expressed in EFF. So if we are to answer directly and give MK an ideology that I don't think they have, you would have to give them that RET bunch that was in the ANC, and that RET bunch it finds itself expressed even in the EFF. So you would say, well, EFF, ANC, and MK have similar orientation when it comes to ideology, when it comes to the policies that they choose, because these are breakaway ANC parties, and they've specifically expressed themselves as people who want to implement the policies that ANC does not want to implement.
Just to give context to what you were explaining now, particularly around the ANC conference, can you give a short, brief, very palatable explanation as to how ANC elects its leader? So how Ramaphosa would have come to be elected, or for it to become an ANC, a Ramaphosa ANC, as they call it?
Firstly, we must reject that idea of a Ramaphosa ANC. I think the chair of the ANC, Mr. Comrade Gwede has been clear to say there's no ANC of Ramaphosa. And I think that ANC of someone emanated from the time of Save South Africa, of people speaking about an ANC of Zuma. And I don't think there was enough pushback against it. And as some of the people who are ANC supporters who were questioning against the use of that term, but there's no ANC of Jacob Zuma. So the ANC of Ramaphosa actually comes from there. It is still incorrect as it was incorrect then, because ANC presidents come and go. They are elected by the branches of the ANC, as you asked, and they can even be removed by the branches of the ANC. They can stay in office and finish their terms in government, and they can stay in office and not finish their terms. We have an example of the former president Thabo Mbeki, the former president Jacob Zuma. We have President Ramaphosa in his office going into his second term, and hopefully he's going to finish the term. Once he finishes, another president will come. So it is an unfair characterization to say there's an ANC of Ramaphosa. We can't discount, though, that it has been an argument advanced by President Zuma to his supporters, and they have interpreted that phrase to mean a particular set of policies that the ANC is implementing, whether on energy, on mineral resources, or on the economy itself. So when they say, for example, an ANC of Ramaphosa, it has a policy implication beyond that statement. And if we are to interpret the results, then we would have to also take as to what went into the mind of a typical MK voter when they were voting. So they literally voted against an ANC of Ramaphosa, which is unfair. And I think we need, as ANC, to work to correct that.
How are ANC leaders elected?
Well, ANC presidents are elected by representatives from provinces, and those representatives from provinces reflect the membership base of that province. You know, for example, KZN and Gauteng are one of the largest provinces, with the smallest one being Western Cape. So they are elected by branches, because the branch convenes and they decide on who they want as a president, and whoever is sent at conference represents that branch. So branches across South Africa elect the president of the ANC. And that's what we know. We go to those conferences to provide support, some of us, to the conference itself.
Now to the election outcome. ANC comes in at 40, DA, I think, at 23, MK just under 15, EFF, I think, just under 9. Coalition talks begins, because that's what's required to get us across the line. During an ANC meeting, you now come and you were there with your placards protesting. What exactly were you protesting against?
Well, I think what has been prominent to these elections specifically before people voted, especially amongst our age group. I'm saying our age group specifically because I think
You're older than me, but
yes. Let's say 25 to the 40s. Okay. The debates that dominate those mindsets and how we vote, we tend to think a lot into in the economic direction that the country is taking. So we vote on issues of the economy, because as a black middle class, as an unemployed young South African who's not working, you are concerned as to what type of policies you want expressed in government, because you want them to improve your life, or you want them to empower other people who find themselves in your position. So the results, I think, were a reflection of that, especially when it comes to the ANC, because there is a perception that following these results, we must not deny anymore that the ANC has not done enough to advance people's lives economically. So quite often when we campaign, we quote statistics that has to do with human settlements, housing, RDP, water, and sanitation, all these stats that you know, which ANC has done incredibly well on in extending basic services to people. And people, that message no longer lands because people want more than that. And the sense that I got was that it was a message to the ANC to say, we want you to do more on the economic side of things. So when I protested, I went to the NEC. It was not a protest against the NEC, but it was a protest against, I think, a media campaign that is still going on, by the way, that seeks to suggest that the markets, the rand, they want a particular type of coalition between the ANC and the DA. And taking into account everything that I said, I think that type of coalition would be a betrayal to everyone who has voted either for the ANC or against the ANC, making an economic statement. That would be a betrayal of those voters, because if you are already an ANC that is perceived to be doing very little to transform the economy and transform the society to empower people, then you go to in bed, literally, with an opposition party that has stand in opposition of all the laws that ANC has come to introduce to at least try to bring progress. That hasn't been that much significant in the last 30 years. It is going to be problematic, and it is going to present a challenge for us as young people in the ANC to go out and convince people to still vote for the ANC. So I went to the NEC with my hard DA signs and to not betray the Palestinian cause. DA wants to protect, to destroy the ANC, because I felt strongly that there is a media campaign and there's no one in the ANC or anywhere who is speaking. At the time, I think it was Thuli Madonsela who was speaking. She's not an ANC-aligned person. There was Lindiwe Sisulu speaking. But outside that, there was no one who's speaking to say, well, there are other options. The DA option is not the only option. And it doesn't reflect the views or preferences of everyone in the country.
When you started by saying that the markets, the rand, wanted a particular outcome. But that brings up the question as who's they? Who are the markets?
Who are the markets?
Yeah.
It's a very important question in South Africa. Yeah, who are the markets? You know, already I told you that I'm a student of politics. And if you are a student of politics, you will also be taught some little bit of economics. So I made this reference when I was outside the NEC venue that we were told on our economics book that the first prominent time that ANC considered what the markets would feel was with a speech of Nelson Mandela to the World Economic Forum. It was written by Tito Mboweni. So apparently the draft was read, and then there were concerns that, this draft is too socialist leaning. You are going to go there and freak out everyone. So the speech had to be modified to appease the markets. What followed then, since 1992, when that had happened, was a series of ANC policy positions, that of the ANC and its alliance, being created, remodified and changed to make the market a friend, like happy. You'd know that the first policy document of the ANC in government was the RDP. It was a policy that actually came from COSATU, one of its alliance partners. So as the time progressed after the administration of President Mandela, we went into gear, and you know what was the position of COSATU and SACP to gear, ASGISA, and all the other policies. There was actually a phrase about asifuni gear, asifuni ASGISA, and all of that. They did not want it because all those policies were considering what the markets wanted, what the rand wanted. Until now, I think ANC has been at its best in government, trying to balance the interests of everyone. And I think we can make a fair statement to say those interests have been taking into consideration what the markets would be happy with first before the voter, basically. So I think I don't know who the market is, as that I can point to a person, I can point to a province and point to a town in a particular province, and it's not the provinces that voted ANC overwhelmingly. It's not the provinces that even ANC lost with a close margins, but we know in South Africa, when we speak about the markets, who are referring to. I'm just not making that reference because I don't want to be called a Gupta bot.
The role of the media in politics. I must say, in not left or right, but there are times I've seen billboards sponsored by news houses that have a particular message where it's like, okay, this looks like it's targeting Gupta or Gupta aligned, or unmasking certain people. What's the role of the media, and in particular, what would you highlight from what you saw that made you say, no, this is enough, I need to do something about it?
I actually gave the response I'm going to give you now to a Daily Maverick journalist. I was speaking to her while I was driving here.
Is it
I'm not sure. Not you guys, but they're also speaking about misinformation during this election period, about social media and its impact, and why we have certain people with ghost accounts we don't know who are very influential online. And they asked specifically, what is the role of the media in this climate or in these negotiations that are currently happening? And I gave an example of the American media landscape, because in America, at least, certain media houses take a particular viewpoint. You know how they are expressed on the ideological spectrum. You know, for example, Fox News or ABC or CNN, how they project the news and who they support. And they don't even hide it. In South Africa, though, it's different, because all South African medias take this posture that they are independent. And then there's an expectation that they respond or report news fairly, accurately, and independently. And quite often we don't see that. So they do make the attempts to be neutral, but I think when they are pushed against the wall, they show their true colors. And I think in this instance, a former apartheid propaganda tool, which is Media 24, has really shown itself to be representing those old interests in the new democratic dispensation. Specifically, I was revolted by the fact that in a day, there would be 4 or 6 articles that are running, promoting the DA coalition as the only thing that ANC should consider, that even the editor of the newspaper would even write opinion pieces or columns supporting that coalition. Currently, over the last, I think, 2 days, they are running a poll by some a foundation, and we know that foundation, we know where it's situated in the ideological spectrum again. So they are pushing this idea that only that option is allowed. And if South African media house present themselves to be neutral, I think we should demand more from them, and we should push back. Unless if they tell us that this is our ideology, this is the political party we support. So when we read news from them, we don't even get offended. We just know. I watch Fox News, for example, when I want to watch Donald Trump praise worship. I watch CNN when I want to watch Biden praise worship. But I don't read News 24 or read City Press and listen to EWN and expect a particular presenter to take a particular political view that blatantly supports whatever in the country is happening at the time.
From once again, still under media coverage, devil's advocate. Let's say the media are communicating what the markets want.
Yes.
And if what the market wants is something that makes the rand more stable and helps with the interest rate and the cost of living, is it such a bad thing?
I think that's why ANC itself is a center-left party, because it recognizes the need to balance the expectations from its base, the voters, and the rest of society. And it also understands the need of satisfying the interests of the so-called white monopoly capital, because at the end of the day, you rely on them to create jobs, to give credibility or legitimacy to your stay in power, that you are in power because you have a private sector that is creating the much needed jobs for you. You have a private sector that is developing your country and allowing the much needed progress and prosperity in the country. But we have a situation where ANC has bent backwards in the last 30 years to appease the markets, to appease the private sector, but the private sector hasn't come to the fore to play fully. And I think this is not my own observation. The former president, specifically Thabo Mbeki, has continued to decry the fact that the government has created this environment for business to operate, but they haven't been really forthcoming to create the much needed jobs. We have an employment rate amongst the youth people which is highest in the world. So we know the current president has come up with a number of programs targeted at job creation for young people. But even those programs haven't really registered much success. So the markets, they are a fair consideration by a political party like the ANC or whichever political party that is going to come. So you can't just come and disregard the markets. But what we are saying is that in considering the markets, do not disregard the views of the rest of the population. As I said in my previous responses, that I think on the 29th of May, voters voted and made a political statement to the ANC that we acknowledge you have given us houses, we acknowledge we have electricity, and please work on your load shedding. We acknowledge that you have, they are. So we acknowledge all this expansion of basic services, but we need you to act fast on the economic side. So if they are saying that at the same time is a vote of no confidence on the market themselves. People are saying for the last 30 years, the markets haven't been good to them. Because if they were good, people would be supporting the ANC in large numbers, people would be employed, there wouldn't be this anxiety in the country about the future, I think.
Okay, fine. We understand what the markets want and what ANC wants, etc. Mm-hmm. But if you were to, from an ideological aspect, what is it that ANC stands for? What is it that DA stands for? And can this be achieved?
I think I want to answer it this way because it has dominated the public discourse. I think all political parties lost these elections. Anyone who did not get 50 plus is a loser. So we're all losers. So we're all operating from a 0% base. So I think it must be clear to everyone. So we must not make it a numbers issue that ANC must coalesce with another party that has another big number, because all of us lost. And if you are operating from a zero base, then you should look as to which political parties have similar party position, because you are able then to respond to that, to say, what is the majority, what did the majority vote for? So if you do look at the ideological spectrum, I already said I don't think MK has an ideology. Their ideology is just expressing rejection to the ANC of Ramaphosa, which is an unfair characterization. I think EFF has expressed itself as a far left party. You know, the DA has always expressed itself as a center-right, I would even say a right-wing party. So if you are ANC now and you are at an advantage because you did get that 40%, though operating from a zero base, you should consider what most people voted for policy-wise. Because if you do that, you have the best chances of surviving the next elections. But if you don't do that, all of us, including that 40% and all the other percentages in those similar party positions, are going to reject you in the next elections, because instead of aligning yourself with those similar party positions, which are, by the way, some of them breakaways to the ANC, you chose to vote for to side with an ideology or party position or a policy like the DA that has been rejected by most of the voters. So I hope I answered your question correctly, but I think that's what I think about the ideological spectrum.
Okay. So as an ANC supporter and activist, what's the coalition you would want to see? Maybe even government of national unity that you would want to see?
Well, first, as I said in the beginning, I don't reject a government of national unity. I don't reject a coalition. I don't think we have a choice. A lot of people have made issues about the fact that EFF is an unstable party and is not reliable. I think it's a false statement to make. The EFF, I'm not advocating for them. I'm just making an argument. The EFF has been in charge of Ekurhuleni with the coalition partners there, which happen to be us, the ANC, Ekurhuleni and Joburg. They haven't collapsed those municipalities. They haven't tabled senseless motion of no confidence to disrupt the municipality. In fact, political parties that have done that are political parties now which are praised for stability. In Tshwane, where I live, we have the DA that has been in charge at least for the last 8 years, if I'm not mistaken. They have literally collapsed the city. I don't know how many mayors they had. One of the mayors was chased out of office for chowing a cookie there in the office. There was another mayor who was chased out because he falsified qualifications. So city of Joburg, city of Tshwane, independently, they are the size of many countries we can count and not finish before this episode ends. So if we are to be practical and say these are dangers and we put particular parties as danger points, we must also be honest, because all these political parties that ANC can get into coalition with, they are in governments in one way or the other, and they have worked with ANC in one way or the other. And personally, I'm not consumed by so much hate over Julius or President Zuma, because these were people who were in the ANC. That ANC itself convinced us that they can lead us. I think if Julius or Floyd never left ANC, they would be ministers in an ANC government. And I don't think they are a policy threat because they only have 9% in parliament. So whatever wild policy they want will never be passed in parliament. I also don't think President Zuma is a policy threat. He was a president for how many years? 8 years. He never presented any radical policy shift in the policies of the country. The only policies he adopted as radical was when he was pushed against the corner when it comes to his own popularity in the ANC and popularity in the country. So his own fight back was to introduce this set of policy. It was late before he implemented them. He was selling socks in Kandla. That is his own words, by the way, that he's going there to sell socks. So Ningangshayi ma MK. So I don't think both these political parties present any significant policy threat. And I must say, I do not want to express them as my coalition choices. I just wanted to highlight those, that I am not scared of Julius, I'm not scared of Zuma, but I'm scared of Helen and John, because I know their capacity and who they represent. Julius and Zuma represent their jackets. Helen and John, I don't think they represent their jackets. I'll let the people think.
Thank you for making time for us and making it palatable and entertaining. Guys, thank you for tuning in. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Let us know what you think and what you'd like from us. TJ Maslela, same place, same time.